All right, the last piece of this is we want to sometimes collapse data into different classes or categories in order to show them in a histogram. And one great example is this is for the data set that you'll be looking at for your homework. What I want you to do is if you scroll down here, you're going to see, or if I scroll down, we're going to see scores for 50 junior high school boys. These are scores for the standing long jump. And up here is the type of frequency distribution that we'd like to display in our histogram. So you know the way that we start this is we enter all of these scores, which I've entered previously, into a column. Our column label is long jump in inches, and all of the 50 or so scores are listed here for you. Previously, I've used the data analysis tool pack and descriptive statistics to get a feel for what my distribution looks like. It seems as though the lowest score in the distribution was a 46 and the highest score in the distribution was a 90. When I initially set this up, I did it much like we did for the VO2 max scores. I set up bins, and these bins are kind of like categories saying, I want to know what is the frequency of scores that are less than 46, or are 46 or fewer. What is the frequency of scores that are 47 to 46? What's the frequency of scores that are in this range between 48 and 47? So when we set this up in this way and we run our histogram function within the data analysis tool pack, we end up with something that looks like this for our frequency distribution chart. Can you see what's on the far right side here? Here are our bins, okay? How many 46s are there? There's only one. How many 47s? There's only one. How many 48s? So this distribution is quite spread out. So if we look at the full range in this frequency distribution chart, we see that we don't do such a hot job of summarizing things by having only one unit of jump score in each bin. There must be a way that we can summarize, collapse this data so that it can be more meaningful. So I'm going to take this figure, which comes from a textbook, which is kind of a beautiful summary of this data. And we're going to try to create that now using the histogram function within the tool pack. You'll see that what I did in this instance is I inspected this graphic and I saw that these were increments of 5 inches between each of these different categories, bins, or classes, if you will, of jump scores. I noticed that the first bin, all right, seems to have a range of scores around 45 inches. The second bin has a range of scores around 50 inches. And since these are equal increments between, it made sense for me to set my first bin up at the lowest level of what I wanted to see here in my histogram, which was 42.5 inches. And the next level or bin or class was going to be 47.5. 47.5. So if I have a bin that collects all of the scores that are less than 42.5 inches, those would be scores out here, and then I set up my next bin such that it's all the scores that are between 42.5 and 47.5 inches. You can see here that it would have a midpoint of 45. I'll be able to collect and summarize that data in a nice way. In order for this to be accurate, I need to make sure that my bins are coming up by equally spaced units. So in this case, I'm going to jump from 42.5 to 47.5 to 52.5 to 57.5, and I'm going to make sure that these bins will capture the highest score in my distribution, which was 90 inches. I now can run another round of data. I'm clicking on the data tab up here, coming over here to data analysis. I'm going to click on histogram. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to choose my input range is the same. It's the long jump score. Only in this rendition, of running this program, I'm going to select my bin range being this column. Okay, I've clicked on labels, cumulative percent, chart output, and then I need to find a place to put my output. So I'll click down here, I'll click in here, I'll find a nice place where I can put this data. Let's see what we've got here. Maybe right under here would be good. We'll come over a little bit. And I found a nice cell to put this data in. I'm going to click OK. All right, we can see, as opposed to the histogram that was created when we had single unit increments in our bins or our classes, we're going to get a histogram here that's much more easily understood in terms of a data summary. I'm going to clean this up really quickly. If you want to watch me, I'm clicking on frequency here. I'm getting rid of the legend. Let's say that I didn't have any axis labels. They were not here. I could come to the right hand side, click plus. I could put axis titles here, and I could type down here. These are, well, this is frequency here, so I'm going to highlight this in here. I'm going to type frequency. That's always going to be on our y-axis. I'm going to make this title histogram showing distribution of long jump scores, and our n was 50. I seem here to have lost my label for my x-axis, so I'm going to come up here. I'll click on axis titles again, click again. Okay, brought it back, and I'm going to call this long jump scores. The units are inches. This again over here, I highlight, and I'm going to call it frequency. And we're getting something that looks pretty decent. I can change the dimensions of it so that it shows more clearly the column heights. Okay, so we're almost there. I'm going to click on these columns, right click. I'm going to outline each of these with a black. I then am going to click on each of these columns again. I'm going to choose Format Data Series. I'm going to bring my gap width down. So now I can very clearly see, and now we're getting something that looks a lot more like this picture. We need to, though, have a center point that is labeled appropriately. 45 is kind of the center between the limits of this class, which went from 42.5 to 47.5, and I like this beautiful way that they've labeled it here, so I'm going to try to do the same thing down here. One of the ways that I can do that is I can come down here, and it looks like there are no scores that are less than 42.5 inches, so I'm going to simply take that area and delete it. And there doesn't seem to be any scores here above the 92.5. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to delete it. I then am able to come down and change this instead of 47.5. Remember, the center point of this was actually 45 because we had scores from 42 to 47.5. So why don't I make this center point 45. I'm going to make the next center point 50, 55, 60, 65. I seem to have a pattern here, so I can pull it down. Okay, and now I have these labels, which look an awful lot like these labels. And I think the last thing that I might want to do is to put some tick marks in the middle there. I think I can click on this axis. I can then choose over here axis options. I can add some tick marks in. I can put some minor tick marks on the outside, and that did it. I now have a beautiful histogram which illustrates the distribution of these scores much better than this histogram, which would have been created before. Thank you.